This is a Clouds weather alert.
Good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center coming on the air because we do have a couple severe thunderstorm warnings here in play right now as we're tracking things across the region. We have a couple storms here that are exhibiting weak rotation and also some wind enhancement. So this is kind of an odd situation here as we're tracking things because we have severe thunderstorm warnings, but as they kind of broaden the view here, you'll see that we really don't have maybe a whole bunch of lightning showing up. That's an odd scenario here overall as we're looking at things, but we have a wind enhancement here as we're tracking it toward American Beach there. You see areas of Nassau and Camden and a little bit of Duval here under a severe thunderstorm warning at 2:15 a.m. So at about 1:36 a.m. or so, the Weather Service there in Jacksonville was tracking a potentially severe thunderstorm located near Talbot Island, or 8 miles south of Fernandina Beach, moving north at about 30 miles an hour. So Fernandina Beach, Yulee, Amelia City, Talbot Island, and Dungeness there under this. And they're also talking about they need to remain alert for a possible tornado. Tornadoes can develop out of severe thunderstorms of little to no advance warning. So we need to be very mindful of this here. Honestly, I was getting ready to go on because I thought the storm to the north that I'm going to see in a second was going to get a tornado warning there for a moment. But then there's a thunderstorm warning on this one, severe thunderstorm warning on one on the storm right after to the north because there's weak rotation, but maybe not enough to prompt a tornado warning. But just remain alert for a possible tornado. Tornadoes can develop quickly from severe thunderstorms. If you spot a tornado, go at once into a small central room in a sturdy structure. And for your protection, move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a building. And torrential rains occurring, so there could be a little bit of flooding. So don't drive your vehicle through flooded roadways as we're looking at things there. And as we look toward the north, this storm also exhibiting some rotation. It's not quite as tight as it was. You'll see what I'm talking about. We're getting some brighter greens here for a couple frames, and then I see in this BSU that's right around, it looks like State Road 252 there, in towards southeast Georgia. So hadn't had any warnings since in our area since early on that Sunday morning. We had one issued from the Tallahassee office talking about our 62 counties there. But we have one right now here up into southeast Georgia, and another one that includes a little of southeast Georgia and more so into northeast Florida. But this is for northwestern Camden, southeastern Brantley, and northeastern Charlton until 2:15. At 1:30, a severe thunderstorm, a potential severe thunderstorm located 8 miles north of Keens Ferry, or 8 miles northeast of Folkestone, moving north at 25 miles an hour. So some damage to roof siding and trees could occur. It's going to mainly remain over rural areas, but remain alert for a possible tornado. Tornadoes, again, and I'll reiterate, and this is coming from the Weather Service in Jacksonville. They reiterate, and reiterate here that tornadoes can develop quickly here from severe thunderstorms. If you spot a tornado, which is going to be really hard to do at night in this type of setup anyway, if it was during the day, I mean, with the way the structure is on these, maybe you could see it, but at night, not going to happen. I wouldn't think, especially with not really much lightning, if any, around. So, just if you spot a tornado, go at once into that small central room in a sturdy structure. So, again, watching that very careful. If that's some really nasty wind enhancement there. If there's not, spin. I mean, even though the spin here, I guess you could say, the rate on that wasn't maybe tight enough for a tornado warning. That latest scan actually increased the winds here just west of the southeast Georgia community of Jerusalem here. We're tracking winds to maybe 60 miles an hour, and I don't see any type of debris co-located. So we just have to watch. So right there west of the community of Jerusalem in southeast Georgia, we do have some wind enhancement. This shows winds to 60 at a pretty low level, so that can do some damage. It's a very rural area, though, quite honestly. But this other storm is not in a rural area. This is in an area where folks may be vacationing. They may be, just kind of getting awakened here by the winds picking up, the rain coming on in here, and it might not even be awake, but this could bring some really strong gusty winds toward these coastal communities, even down a tree or two here, whether there's any type of tornado with this or not. So I know we're always watching things here for our 62 counties. We're always trying to stay on top of things here. We're in Bradford. We're always on for any tornado warning storms within the 62 counties, but severe thunderstorm warning storms, when we see something a little more escalated like this, in a couple different areas, mind you, with some rotation, thought we'd jump on in here with the coverage. But we see this here toward American Beach and Fernandina Beach. That's where it's headed in that northerly direction, a little bit of a northwesterly component, it would seem. This is very unusual, and we're watching the storm up here. Well, I think they just updated this box. They sure did. They took the tornado possible tag out of it. Now they're saying more about the straight line winds. So at 1:49 a.m., a severe thunderstorm is located 10 miles northeast of Homeland, or 10 miles west of Woodbine, moving north at 30 miles an hour. So a pretty rural area up here, thankfully, but pretty strong winds popping on up here as we're tracking things. And as we look toward the south, around American Beach, the rotation threat seems to have waned, but there is some strong wind potential. It didn't look quite as evident as what we were seeing toward the north here. It could be the angle on the radar, but we could have winds to 40, 50 in there, headed right up in toward the Fernandina Beach Airport here in just a matter of seconds, Roy. And that could still be problematic, obviously, in some regards. So we just have to be kind of mindful. It's a weird pattern, I know. It's comparable, but it's not comparable in a way. I mentioned this and people think I'm trying to hype this up. I'm not trying to hype this up here by any stretch, but when you have stuff coming to soar in this weird direction like this, it's a little, reminiscent of when Hurricane Irma was approaching us back in 2017. Granted, that was a much, 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 much lower pressure, much stronger system than this, much, much stronger system than this. So it was able to produce a lot tighter circulations, but it's just the general idea of stuff coming off the water here and moving on in. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit, but we haven't had tornado warnings toward the First Coast region in the southeast Georgia. Hopefully that stays the storyline. That situation we even had a tornado in St. Johns County that was very damaging, but we did have tornado situation on Saturday in Holmes County in the Florida Panhandle. It seems that was pretty damaging, but with this idea, you kind of have the wind direction. We're getting stuff coming in from the southeast and going to the north and west. That's very unusual for us. That's a tropical-like setup. This is reminiscent. I said it back like Thursday, and I'll say it again. Reminiscent of a really weak tropical system. Probably more reminiscent of a tropical depression in some ways than even a tropical storm, because I haven't seen anything just overwhelming with even the rains toward our area. Now, that's another story. I know, as you see here, the winds around the middle of the city could be around 50. I know we did have, a little bit gusty winds Sunday night around here around Stark. It wasn't overwhelming. We had the warning Saturday. It was worse then. Strongest wind gust of the year here so far east of Stark that I measured then back on that Saturday. But we didn't even have an advisory, but it's just squally weather. Reminds you of an approaching tropical system. There's not an approaching tropical system. There's a low pressure, but it's not going to develop tropically here. That's not going to happen around our area. It's not the right type of pattern for that by any stretch. But my point being here is just reminiscent of that some. The idea of it is, there's some similarities that we generally, see with tropical systems that we're seeing with this, but there are also a lot of differences. This is not a normal severe weather pattern for us here, unless we have, a tropical system or something coming on in. But as we look here, we got an update on this. The winds just started picking up a little. They took the tornado possible tag out of this here too, though. I don't know if they exactly meant to, because they put a tornado watch remains in effect. There's not a tornado watch, but then they made that in here, type that in here, put that text in here by mistake. But Fernandina Beach, Yulee, Amelia City, and Dungeness here, moving north generally at 25, a little northwesterly component. That latest scan, though, that tightened winds up a little bit there as we're looking. Not really much circulation, but right there near the Fernandina Beach Airport. It's pretty, highly populated area here, right just north of the airport. I would suspect these winds aren't going to be doing too much damage here as we're looking. Well-built structures really shouldn't have too much damage unless there's trees nearby. That would be the problem here. If you have a tree and then you have a car and then a tree falls on that, or a tree falls on a home, and that's going to do some damage, obviously. I know Saturday morning, we don't know the cause of any strikes, but there was a deadly small plane crash there toward parts of Nassau County in the Yulee area. Just one person aboard that. Very tragic. It was happening right around severe weather warning time, though, Saturday morning. So, it'd be interesting to read into the investigation to see how big of a cause weather may have been in that. But as we were tracking things there, so just kind of giving you guys the very latest here on the overall scenario here meteorologically in toward the weather center. Again, thoughts and prayers to those impacted by that there in Yulee Saturday morning. But as we go ahead and continue to monitor things, continue to monitor the scenario, let's go ahead and broaden the view with these 2 warnings. We have some rain coming up in the south. Let's look at Marion if there's some wind enhancement. There's been little weak areas of spin and or wind enhancement here as we've been looking, for a while. A few things that look kind of close to a warning, but then we started getting these to get a little bit stronger even. First time I got our equipment, really ready to go here in a while with things for this area up here. It was looking like it might be close to a tornado warning, but then we got the thunderstorm warning here, severe thunderstorm warning here, and then we got one up here right after and decided to come right in since we had the tornado possible tags in those at the time, and there was a chance that those could quickly get escalated if they strengthened the spins into tornado warnings instead. Those spins per se have weakened, but the wind in the southern area has probably gotten a little bit worse here, and even, in the northern area, too, at times it was kind of getting worse, but it looks like the last couple scans there, that's kind of falling off some of it. It's moving east of Winnaker there. So moving up toward Nahunta and Brantley County. That's something to watch. Another thing to watch, just in terms of the history factor here. Not that we're going to have this. We're not going to have this. I can't imagine. But yesterday there, that Mother's Day, which was the 11th back in 2008, was also the anniversary of something toward the Darien community that was very significant. And that was a, historic EF4 tornado that came on through there. So bizarre. That was a Mother's Day morning, Sunday morning, EF4, just barely north of our covered area. I remember that, tracking that. I believe it was even, I could get on my antenna there, WSAV covering that. They're getting that on my antenna back then, but also, it was coming in that morning, but also some of the local channels for some tornado warnings in our area as well, if I recall. So just, interesting there as we're looking and as we're tracking things. I know an EF4 tornado, that was devastating for that community there. I haven't seen really, anything like that here. Toward our area, as we're looking, as we're thinking about stuff, you remember the Albany and the Adel tornadoes, those were the EF3s. I was an EF4 there in McIntosh County, on a Sunday morning, a Mother's Day morning in 2008, which was the 11th that year. So, had me a little concerned. We had the anniversary on Saturday for Tallahassee with the tornadoes there. That's the 1-year anniversary of those 3. Debris signatures showing up on radar. Just a crazy situation there as we were looking at things. Another thing that's been kind of crazy, and I know I kind of alluded to it, and then we were kind of getting some new updates, didn't continue, is the rainfall here. I know we haven't got as much as we were thinking we'd get here as we were tracking towards some of our area, which we really need the rain. We did finally get, looking back on that Sunday, close to about an inch here east of Stark, so that was good because we weren't really getting any for a while. We finally got that in the rain gauge. We want the rain. We don't want the the severe weather aspects, the lightning and the light. But as we're kind of looking at things here, as we're kind of tracking them, let me go ahead and show you here. I'll show you a look here at the rainfall over the last 12 hours or so. You see some of these blues here, around an inch or so, and the lighter blues over the last 12 hours. Some areas haven't gotten near that much in the last 12 hours. You see Tallahassee, I know they haven't, You know, they did have a severe storm on that Sunday morning, but they haven't really got an overwhelming amount of rain, and the flood watch was canceled. We don't want flooding, but some of these areas definitely could use more rain. But some areas that don't need more rain, believe it or not, toward the north, they really have gotten, you know, a deluge here, more like what we were thinking, just north of our covered area. And this doesn't really do it justice even. I mean, some areas are over 10 inches when I was looking at some other products. It may be even higher than that now because it's been a little while, you know, since I was looking at that. That was like 12 hours ago, and then 12 more hours, and you have like east of Statesboro, another 6 inches. I know it was around Metter, I believe it was, where I saw a 10-inch estimate. So, you know, now they've had another 2. So they, you know, talking about a foot of rain, give or take, there in some of these areas. And then around Vidalia, Georgia, we have a flash flood warning right now, continuing to 6:15. It's just north of our covered area for Toombs County. They've seen, you know, amounts of 3 to 4 inches, with another 1 to 2 that were possible through that time frame. That was it, just a little after midnight. So even though we and a lot of our counties haven't seen the rain quite like we were thinking we're going to see, and there's still a chance some will as we look ahead. Some areas to the north have, and some areas have actually seen too much. So it's a bizarre setup here when, you know, we have the pattern, stuff's gone north, but also stuff's gone south. You know, we've seen a flood threat really start to increase for areas there towards South Florida. Some of the high-risk models are going pretty crazy here. And with the way the FETA moisture is coming in, I think it's possible. Now, you know, really the models have taken a turn, and they've issued a flood watch for the Miami area. Some models have been really aggressive. Models have been really off lately, so take that, you know, caveat here into account before I say what I'm about to say. But some models are giving them like 10 inches of rain here later today around Miami in an urban area. That could cause big problems. So, you know, that's something. The models have had trouble. You know, this is an odd setup, and, you know, the more data we get input into the models, the better. So this is already an odd setup. The models are going to probably struggle with anyway, but we need more data here into the models. That's so important, you know, to be able to kind of track things, get that real time look, and then kind of, you know, use that, you know, simulation here going forward to, you know, give you an idea of what could happen. I know, you know, as we're looking here, one factor in all of the weather pattern that's been unfortunate here under the Moody radar and the Valdosta area has been down. You know, we could be using some of that data here as we're looking at things. I know we had a storm Saturday in Georgia. We really could have used that radar to look at that, you know, as we're tracking things. But just, you know, as we're looking last 12 hours here around areas there on Sebring and Avon Park, a half foot of rain. That's very significant. I know they need the rain like around St. Cloud. They had a wildfire going there, you know, in a more rural area in that region generally. Granted, homes weren't that far away, but as of what I was looking at earlier on, they weren't really being threatened. But they did get an inch of rain in the last 2 hours. That's helpful, but could use more. We don't want too much. It's a delicate balance here, obviously, between too little and too much. You're probably wondering why I'm on here in the middle of the night on a Monday morning as we're tracking things. It's because we have 2 severe thunderstorm warnings in play right now at 2:15 a.m. here in our area. One for Nassau and Camden, portions of those areas, and the other for portions of Brantley, Camden, and Charlton. And both of them were showing some weak rotation where if the rotation were to tighten, a tornado warning may have been required. So wanted to try to get ahead of that. As we saw the wind just go away there, further off toward the north. So let's see what they said there. The Weather Service just sent out a statement. Okay, so they're canceling that. It's weakened below severe limits and no longer poses an immediate threat to life or property. But heavy rain still possible with the thunderstorm there. As you see, I know as we're looking at things, you see that dark green on the map here. That's the marginal risk for day ahead. Another day with a small risk of some strong to severe storms. Tornado risk expected to maybe be confined further east, but we'll have to just wait and see. Could still have something overnight pop toward the west here. We had a tornado warning in West Alabama as we were looking toward. I mean, some of the markets kind of overlap, but I know Montgomery stations, and I saw Mobile Station on as well for the tornado warning as we were looking there back Sunday night. So as we're kind of looking at things, as we're tracking them, I know I was pretty short-lived, but as we're kind of looking at things here, marginal risk, you see the hail risk a little bit further back, and then the wind risk a little more broad. We still got to watch even in the overnight here. Let's pull up some of the parameters. The parameters are actually more toward the west than they are what we have the current warning acts. And yeah, super second composite. That's a 2. That's what we had some tornado warnings in Georgia on that Saturday. Nothing though like what things really progressed to toward Holmes County, where we had them get up to an 8. The supercell composite earlier on Saturday. And that was really dramatic. And things could upgrade a little in terms of these parameters, and there's always a chance even the risk could go to slight 2 out of 5 in an area where we had tornado watch then on Saturday. If we get enough heating and something to mix in the pressure pattern, it's possible things could get a little bit worse than what we're forecasting here in terms of the severe threat. And that could also be the case toward like South Florida. That's something that's really a new development here, where they could have a bigger problem than we were thinking originally here. As you see some of those parameters, some of these storms, and even there, north there and over Cuba, from what we can see. But you see these little pop-ups here. I'm not seeing a whole bunch of rotation on this, but I know if we get some of that stuff in a more, favorable area, that's the type of stuff, if we have enough instability in between, that could kind of become a problem here. So we'll just have to wait and see. I don't know if they're really organized enough. I mean, they have very, very weak rotation with them right now. They're not a problem, really, I wouldn't think at this point, but just the idea of it, as I'm showing you here, it's just the idea that, if we had stuff like that in a more favorable environment, that could be an issue here as we're looking ahead, as we're tracking things. So further to the east, closer to our area. Not saying that's going to happen, but it's not out of the question as we're looking here. Has to be in a more favorable environment for that to really take hold. I know this storm here is still, it's still hanging on here in northeastern Nassau, right around Fernandina Beach, a pretty highly populated area. This could be a severe, storm here. There's a warning for another 8 minutes for the Fernandina Beach area. These are not like your typical summertime storms at this point. You don't see stuff like this at 2 in the morning. Normally in summer without really lightning, but getting a warning because of wind rotations there. That is, you have a bunch of lightning with most of those. This is more of what you would see in a really weak tropical system, landfalling tropical system. Again, that's not what this is either. It's not to that level of concern here toward our area here as we're looking right now. So, it's an unusual pattern, that's for sure. Because we did have escalated concern toward Holmes County Saturday late morning there. I mean, as we were looking out there in that vicinity, it was a little before maybe some of the worst of the damage, but let's say some of that tornadic activity. I think we got it in here. Yeah, we still got it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it on up. Make sure we have the right video in here loaded. This is going to be from a Saturday there as we were looking. Let me go ahead and change the super before I show it to you. We're doing this all on the fly. It's just a one-man band, but make sure I don't confuse anybody. But we're going to see a Florida 511 camera view from Saturday morning, late morning there, toward the Florida Panhandle, west of our viewing area. We were watching this in case things took an escalation here, where we thought we might have to go on or something, and you have the abbreviation there for Florida 511 camera, but again, this shows the debris from the overall pattern there. It was one that took that escalation. Obviously, if it was going to be something really definitive, we were going on for a regional national threat. We were watching this because, the local threat was going to come into play later on. It wasn't as severe as this, but you can see all that debris there that was flying around in that. At the beginning of that video there on I-10 or on mile marker 95, there's even a tree down that looked like, I don't have that one, but I saw that. It got moved out of the way really quick so people could get by, but it was blocking traffic for a moment there Saturday morning. So, just intriguing to see overall. I know they'll zoom this out eventually, and it clears up kind of, on the view there, the Florida 511 camera, but it's interesting to tell that story there. That is for sure. I'll show that to you one more time. Just kind of reiterate this. You can see the debris in here if you'll look. So those pieces, nothing overwhelming maybe in that view, but still intriguing. Maybe, from that tornadic activity. And when I was looking there, it didn't correlate perfectly with the radar, the signature of where the tornado would have probably been. But there can always be radar displacement when you're not right at it, and there's also a chance it could have been like the roof plank downdraft or some of that debris kind of falling back down here, really, telling that story. So, on Saturday, late morning in the Panhandle, there's worse damage accident there, though, with this as we got further north. We're always seeing quite a bit around Holmes County. But as we're continuing to look here, this warning continues as we're tracking things here. As we're monitoring, I see some different marine warnings like coming up around Key West. That's interesting. But as you see here on Fernandina Beach, we have some wind enhancement. Yeah, pretty highly populated area. Some folks may be vacationing in there even. As we're starting to get toward that summer vacation season per se. It's not officially summer, but you get what I mean. Some wind enhancement moving up towards St. Mary's there in Southeast Georgia. I don't think it's quite enough to keep the warning going unless we're getting some reports. So, did have a gust of 40 at the airport a little while ago, so that's intriguing. That was back a little earlier in the timeline, a little over an hour ago, but it still kind of gives you the idea of what stuff could be capable of here in the overall pattern. I know some of the acts in there moving on through Sunday night around here wasn't really enough to see, advisory type conditions even on radar, and it was still some of the stronger wind we've had here this year. East to Stark, not the strongest. That was Saturday. So we're looking, with the overall data, comparing that relative to different events. But I mean, I might have pretty much, I'd have to double check this, but probably the strongest one we had here, granted it was a lot shorter period of time, but the strongest one we had since Hurricane Helene there, in toward eastern Bradford, where I'm at least specifically. That was, Saturday night comparatively. But 41 customers in the dark in Duval County, 1 in St. John's. So far, none set up in Nassau, but that, could change here. Okay, they're dropping the warning, it looks like, as of that 2:15 time frame. That's good news. It's right there along the coast, so we'll keep our eyes on it. But right now, they're saying a storm which prompted the warning is weakened below severe limit and no longer poses an immediate threat to life or property. Therefore, the warning will be allowed to expire. However, gusty winds and heavy rain are still possible with this thunderstorm. So, we're just gonna continue to track all this. Let me check some of that stuff in South Florida and the Keys. I'm kind of curious to see how that looks, all these marine warnings popping up, because it's not going to be anything like what we had during a Milton. I can't imagine. That was probably a once in a generation, once in a lifetime tornado event towards South Florida back like last year. But, we do have some rotation. Could get some tornado warnings in South Florida as we're looking on that Monday. But that pressure pattern, that instability mixing was just really remarkable back there in October of 2024. But again, kind of telling that weather story for sure, later last year with that impact. As we go ahead and keep looking, there's a lot of moisture. That's an issue here for some training. I mean, that could be a problem here towards some of these areas that need to rain really bad, actually. So it's just a delicate balance. I mean, they've had roads set down toward the Keys here. They really need to rain, but they don't. I mean, they haven't had that much rain since last year, really, towards some of these areas. They need it very badly, the rain, but they don't want the severe weather, the flooding, because there's too much too quick. But continuing to give you the latest. We're here with you just a little longer unless something else pops up in our area. That's for keeping you guys up to date. Keeping you guys informed here. I know it's late. We're talking about Milton. Let me go ahead and kind of remind you guys of something here real quick Bear with me just a second. We're going to pull something up here in our system. Of course, we got to get our hurricane names graphic ready for 2025 already. But I know in 2024, tracking Milton there, just Helene, the bigger story really though, because of everything that happened in our area with that, and up toward the Carolina region, just, tragic, so tragic. And Debbie, toward our area, made landfall that Cat 1, but Milton, in our area, maybe not as much toward the south, but in our area, you kind of almost forget about it a little. It did have that impact in Flagler County for sure. But, this is what Milton was about here, as we were looking after the tornado outbreak when it made landfall there. They did do the post-analysis, determined it was just technically Cat 3, a major hurricane when it hit. I don't want to say barely, because that makes it sound we can minimize it. It was still very significant, deadly tornado outbreak out ahead here in that northeast quadrant. Before it hit was deadly, had that instability and shear mixing in a very, rare way. I mean, something that the models are showing it some, but I mean, it actually see it come into play all these over the years that don't do stuff like that, and then the timing just hit just wrong for disaster to strike with those tornadoes there toward east central and especially southeast Florida as we were tracking things, so we were monitoring. But again, not expecting that today, but there still could be a few here, as we've alluded to, not out of the question. I mean, I'll say where our tornado risk area is. It is a pretty wide one. I mean, it's a small one, but like Saturday. I mean, this is pretty much the last day left of it, but it's easier, I guess, to say now. But the pattern is kind of shown Saturday, or maybe today, later on Monday, is when we could get a tornado threat to start to overachieve or achieve more and toward actually verifying. But the tornado risk small, but there goes from southeast Florida on this Monday. West Palm Beach, Port St. Lucie, Palm Bay, Titusville. I know we've had a bunch of these 2% lately. This one again might have a chance of verifying a little more, especially if we get some of the patterns, with the overall shear and cape to mix system the wrong way here with the weird spin going on, and we have different boundaries involved, and Titusville, Deltona, Palm Coast, Palatka, even here into Bradford County, Green Cove Springs, St. Augustine, Jacksonville, Hilliard, Yulee, Folkestone, Waycross, Brunswick, and then going all the way up here through Savannah, and have to zoom out because it gets further west and gets further east because there's more land, and so land goes further east there. But see all the way up, through Macon, Augusta, and Greenville, and Columbia there, Charleston, Myrtle Beach. So 2% risk, not a big, risk overall. It's something, went from 205 to Holmes County's way. And they had something pretty significant there on Saturday with a pretty significant debris signature there on and off on some of that activity. But again, watching things right now, I know one thing I was noting earlier on is the warm temperatures here toward the East Coast still. They might have cooled some now that we had the rain come through, but still, Mayport at 79. I think it was 80 before that came on through there, maybe. We'll back it up. I know. Yeah, there you go. You see, I mean, at least stops racing before. I don't know if that was before that came through. It might have even been. Okay, it warmed up at one point, and they're interesting, but yeah, before it came through, it probably sitting at 81 there, so that kind of tell that story. But again, just trying to give you the very latest updates here to protect you, your friends, and your family. Let me see if there's any questions or comments here. Any of the viewers at home? Don't see anything right now, but just again, thanks so much for tuning in, trusting me here. We're always on for any tornado warning storms within our 62 counties, our 62 county area. As we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things, I'll be on for national concerns as warranted as well. It could start to get more active later in the week toward like Illinois and the like, toward Thursday, give or take. So we'll have to be watching that if we have something really significant like a tornado emergency, something like that. But we're on for the 62 counties, all tornado warning storms, but severe thunderstorm warnings You know, when we have stuff like we just did, when there's a little more, you know, interest / concern, I'll be on, you know, for those. Once we get in the summertime pattern more, we'll probably not be on for as many of those generally because they start to become more redundant. You expect that more, but we hadn't had much of this lately, so we really wanted to make sure we're kind of being on guard with these, having that rotation potential to it. Kind of adds another element in here that's a little bit unique in case they start to ramp up and need a tornado warning. But because both of them did just now have tornado possible tags, meaning a weak tornado, and you have 0 type tornado, could have been possible. But all the different platforms there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube YouTube. I was going to say Twitter /X, but I'm going too fast with it because I say it so much. But Facebook there, Twitter /X, YouTube. They're at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, and the Cloud Weather website there, cloudweather.com. I know, just trying to keep you guys up to date. We're posting on Facebook and Twitter /X, and then streaming on those two, plus YouTube and Twitch here with all those latest updates, obviously, to keep you guys informed here as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring them. I know always important to stay on top of things here. Let me go ahead and move that off here the screen though. We're going to say here, I'll put the model guidance up, so bear with me. It's had issues for sure lately, but this is an odd pattern, you know, as we're looking. But as you see here, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. potentially, and then let me take the temperature up. I know people tuning in might get confused. I'll leave the current warning up. There was, and you might have seen it, there was a lightning strike just now. That's not in the model. That was actually throwing up here. We're there right near the coast there, Camden County. Yes. But again, continuing to track things here. We'll watch some of that stuff. You know, you see it in southwest Georgia. That can be an issue. If we get 1 or 2 that spin, we could get a quick tornado warning deep into the night or in the morning with some of that, because there's some lightning over there too. I'll have to watch some of the structures here. I know if the parameters don't overlap, it's one thing, but if they do, no, you just never know. Something like that could be an issue. But that's 4 a.m., 5 a.m., because there is, even though you see the green under here, let me take it off because that's for after 8 a.m. I can't see the before 8 a.m. after a certain period on here, but there's a risk in the overnight, technically, a small tornado risk further out toward the west. So we're looking at things, we were tracking here, and we're monitoring. Again, just trying to keep you guys informed here on exactly what's going on. I'm just trying to keep you up to date, obviously. So important. As we give you all the details. Let me go ahead and keep looking here. This will be 6 a.m. potentially on that Monday morning, this morning, that morning commute. You know, it's holiday weekend, but generally not for most an extended holiday weekend. So people having to get up for that early morning commute, even going to school and work, things like that. And we're just continuing to give you guys the very latest here, obviously. You see 6, 7, 8 in the morning, 9, 10, 11, noon. It's a tricky pattern. You see some stuff toward like Dixie, Lafayette counties could be interesting early afternoon. And let me, you know, what we're going to do here, because we're watching South Florida too. I know it's going to make it a little harder to see our stuff. I want to see that training. So this is 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4, 5, 6, that's on your Tuesday now, 7, 8, 9, 10 a.m. Tuesday, 11 a.m. Tuesday, noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4, 5, 6, 7, That's a lot of rain towards South Florida, and it's going to start drying out though after we get later on in the period. But later in the week, going to get very warm and drier. So if you don't get that rain here toward North Florida, South Georgia, which we're hoping, folks will get, but it's not too much, then we could start to have more fire concerns because I haven't really gotten enough in some of these areas. Some have, some haven't. We need to get a little more. We may squeeze out enough in a lot of spots to hold us off a little longer, but it's not quite as good as what we were hoping, but we don't want too much rain either, so gotta keep that in mind. But we still need a little more. We have a little, over an inch or so, I'd say, east of Star, because we've been looking for the whole event here. That's not really enough. It's better than we've been seeing, but it's not enough yet. We could use another inch or two, but we don't, or 3 even, but we don't want like 6 inches in 2 hours. That's a problem, but that's a big problem. But saw that a couple years ago with, I believe it was the middle school flooding, but as we were looking here in Bradford County, but we need a few inches still, I would say, as long as they fall over a little more time. I don't know if that model is really going to give that to us, quite honestly. It didn't really look like it. As we were looking and as we were tracking things, that looked like that was going to be less likely here, but yeah, I'd be, the flood threat's definitely more, escalated now towards South Florida than it is our area, even though they really need to rain. They may get too much. I mean, you think of all the floods they've had going back here. It's been busy. I mean, you remember that Fort Lauderdale flooding a few years ago, give or take. The years kind of go by here lately, it seems like, together. But it's just how things are, I guess, since 2020. But as we're looking at things here, we had that flooding. We had that flooding there toward South Florida, toward the airport and the like. We just got to be careful not to get a repeat of that here as we're looking and as we're tracking. So I think that's about going to do it here for this update. We had those 2 warnings around. See a severe thunderstorm warning popping up in the country, but that's not anywhere around here. It just popped up, but it's in Montana, so not worried about that. I know we had some warnings around Salt Lake on Sunday. That was interesting. Years ago, I'm not going to get into it too much now, but years ago they had, a tornado in the Salt Lake metro there. I think it was in the 90s. That was really impactful. They didn't think they could really have stuff like that up there because you don't generally get tornadoes up there, and it's right in the metro. They could even, sadly, maybe claim to life there, if I recall. A very odd storyline there in Utah years ago. But as we're looking here, I know it's going back to that too. One more topic on that, but since I know it's late, we'll go over it a little. But I believe it was even maybe caught on camera during a broadcast even. It was a very bizarre situation there in Utah, but stuff you just don't get up there. I mean, I've hardly ever seen any tornado warnings in Utah over the years, so to get something like that was remarkable. But now this here is a little rotation east of St. Mary. Let's see if there's more to it than, than maybe that shows. Or hopefully less to it than that. Because I, hate to go off and then come back on, and I know it's in the night, so rather limit the notifications we send out when we're getting really late, unless there's something really escalating here on us. But have to be on, whenever it's matters. I just don't want to go off and then come back on in 5 minutes and send another notification out for something because, it ramped up so quick, and it's better just to stay on because otherwise it takes a few extra minutes to get back here. If we're on and then we go off and then come right back on, so, with another stream versus just come back into this stream or stay with it. But that didn't really look like a lot to me. I don't think that's gonna get a warning here unless something really changes or we get a report or something. It only went to about 40. It's a pretty rural area there, Camden County. Sometimes you're right. That's why you gotta be careful using let's say algorithms there. Like if you're just dependent on some computer model without human interpretation, or just an algorithm, you're looking at something and it says something's going to happen and nobody kind of corrects it. Well, sometimes it picks up on different areas of greens and reds that aren't really going to indicate a tornado. Granted, I will say, I guess, now as I say that, and that's right exactly behind, so this is going to be ahead. So that it was actually picking up on something false, I think, but now something else is trying to develop in there, it would seem. So let me load the recent frames in here. I mean, there wasn't really anything there to get the algorithm to pick it up until now, and the algorithm's going to have to play catch up to this anyway. So No debris in there. That's not co-located. I was looking at stuff earlier on. That's not co-located, but it is picking up a little. Now right here, some of these areas, you kind of little watered and you're not over water. Can be kind of tricky sometimes, but kind of try to spin something up. That's not that tight, but it is trying a little bit more during that latest scan. Let's look up here. If that increases, we'll stick with it in the next scan. I'm talking if it, okay, a decrease. So we're probably not going to stick with that, but it was trying to pulse up. Let's make sure another type of debris in there. Don't think so. Let's just look. East of Elliot's Bluff, it's, an area where it's almost over water anyway. But that can sometimes, you see some, maybe an airport, it looks like there. You can spin something up. That might be the Keens Bay base. I'm not 100% sure, but kind of what it looks like here. Again, as we're looking, sometimes you can get stuff to spin up, but then spin back down. Gotta be careful because there's a little more population right on the edge, but then, with the, area we saw from the topography. As we were looking here in Ahunna, Thalman, these areas, this looks like it's not gonna be, any type of scenario that really gets upgraded unless we're really seeing something from the Robbins radar. Unfortunately, again, the Moody radar is down, and that hurts us here some, but I know we really could have used that Moody radar Saturday for some of the stuff we were tracking there. But sometimes things just happen where the radar or the data, isn't coming on out there, and then you end up having, it down for a little while because of some type of malfunction. But as we're going ahead and looking at things here, as we're tracking, East of Elliot's Bluff here, I want to tighten back up a little on this. It's not overwhelming, but it's in an area here. We've had some tighter signatures over the years. Also watching stuff from the south here. It doesn't look very impressive. After watching this, maybe there's a little weak spin out here. Might be stuff to watch if it tries to get closer to the coast. Very well could, and then that could be an issue here with some stuff that gets advisories or warned here at some point. Not completely out of the question. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking them. Again, just trying to keep you guys safe and informed. This area here, week rotation is east of I-95. So, it's an area there, as we've alluded to, kind of a little bit further over, but could still be impacting some folks. Like around the Keens Bay base, it would seem. Continuing to look at things here in the Weather Center. Just making sure we don't get any type of debris on us all of a sudden. Let me check something here real quick. Okay, so I want to get my geography right here. I'm looking at another mode. So let me zoom out just a little bit here. I've had some stronger tornadoes up there over the years, so that's why. Make sure I'm looking at this right. I'm just trying to check some things. topography wise. Make sure I'm labeling everything right. So right around the Cumberland Sound, East River, Crab Island, apparently, is that what that is? Trying to get my geography right here. Bear with me. Yeah, Crab Island's what it's showing. That's here. And that Spanish kind of looking more, a little more just out from the population, probably. Just didn't want it to spin up into a more populated area. That looks pretty. That looks like, you know, marshy type lands there. Sometimes you can maybe have pattern. I think we might have saw this back in 2018 with that stronger tornado out here. You had that, some of that overall pattern. We really had the, you know, increase in organization out in that area. I mean, sometimes I haven't really studied it maybe enough here as I should have, but just maybe you have some of that effect here where it's kind of acting like it's over water with some fuel to intensify things, but it's actually, you know, able to hit some areas too. I believe it's called the Black Ocean effect and a tropical cyclone is what I'm trying to compare this to. But we had a very strong tornado up there. I believe we had a measured gust in that one that was really high. I believe it was in EF3. Again, just trying to give you guys the latest. Okay, brown ocean effect is the right terminology there. This is what happens when we're on at 2:38 in the morning. But brown ocean effect there. We're talking about really a situation here. That's when a tropical cyclone unexpectedly maintains or even intensifies its strength over land due to moisture from the ground. I wonder if we had something like that going on with that tornado back in 2018 toward areas of eastern Camden County. That was, you know, so impactful there and toward some of those areas. Again, just trying to give you the latest. We had another tornado during Elsa. It was a little weaker, but it was in that general area there as well back in one of those COVID years. So I'm just trying to give you some interesting information here. We're going to wrap it up. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have anybody in danger with this since I was tied in a little, but it's pretty broad looking now and it's not in a populated area. It doesn't really look like. So that's the storyline there. Very, very weak rotation around Atkinson there in Brantley County, but I know we had not in Screven City, which is just north of our area, but Screven County, we had a tornado warning back on that Sunday. So we were watching that up there in the Savannah TV market, just out of our area by, you know, a few counties or so. But that's gonna do it. Thanks so much for tuning in, trusting me. We're going to go to the broad perspective. We'll throw up the temperatures here. 60s, some 70s. I know once we get the rain out of here, we're going to, you know, later in the week, warm up substantially, you know, get hot. And then really see that pattern dry out locally, but maybe more storms nationally here. Winds, you see winds 10, 15, 20, 24, or give or take. Some gusts. Some of these not necessarily in and downpour acts, and some are, but we're at 70 here, pretty much even east is dark. We've had about 2/10 of an inch of rain since midnight, and yesterday we had there, closer to an inch or so. So heading up a little bit. We'll take it, but it's not exactly. We need a little bit more. We don't want the severe weather, but we need the rain because otherwise our drought numbers are not going to improve as much as we were hoping for, and that could lead to more problems here later in the month of May, possibly. So again, it's going to be in us right on the edge of if we really get enough or not to start to really dramatically improve it or just improve it some. Some of the counties, some zones gonna, maybe see a dramatic improvement. Some maybe so much you have flooding, but then others you're not gonna really see much of an improvement at all, and may end up seeing the drought number worsen if they don't get enough precip in here, if they just kind of get that glancing blow. Okay, so that's gonna do it. Have a good night. Stay tuned. Stay safe. We'll be back on as needed later on this Monday. Get some rest. We'll pop back in here if and as warranted. If for some reason we don't have to pop in for local or some flooding, maybe downstate or something like that, we'll be back late Tuesday with another full update here on everything. And I'm sure we'll still be watching things as we're looking here, with some severe weather, but that'll be more maybe toward Illinois, but maybe keeping that logo red as we're watching things toward maybe that Thursday time frame and somewhere in that vicinity in terms of the calendar. So have a good night.